just one of the loveliest things you know that I'm always talking about Gaia TV and the fascinating people that Regina Meredith has on her Open Minds program and many of the other programs. George Noory is a darling as well. And there's a number of other wonderful programs on that too. Our guest this evening, Jackie Cole, is the co-author with her husband, Harvey Rice, of her book, Flight of the Bon Monks, War, Persecution, and the Salvation of Tibet's Oldest Religion. And she's with us this evening. Now, there's a title for a book. Jackie, I'm coming straight to you. You've got it all in there, haven't you? And why not?
Yes. Good evening. Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to talking with you all.
Oh,
My husband and I live in Galveston, Texas, and the first thing I have to do is apologize for our government and hope that it gets better. So, I have been studying the religion of Bun for about 25 years now, and it is the indigenous religion of Tibet prior to Buddhism being introduced in the 7th century. So if you were to look at Tibetan Buddhism stuff and you look at the Bun tradition stuff, if you weren't truly schooled in the iconography, you probably wouldn't see much difference. And most of the ceremonies and rituals and the philosophy behind the religion are the same. So pretty much the same. The Bun tradition has a little bit of a closer connection and edge with the earth and earth-based things, the elements, the spirits of the land and the spirits of the trees, the water, and so forth. So, and it also has a very ephemeral kind of practice that is not ephemeral, it's true, but it's also very not mental or ceremonial. It's in your head, but it's not in your head, it's in your heart, called Dzogchen, which is a way of training your mind in order to be able to see the world in a different way and to know your own true mind, which is really just hidden by all of our distractions.
mm.
So that's Bun. There's a lot to it and a lot of everything going on. As I was going to teachings and learning, one of the things that our teachers do is to present their credentials for their why their capacity for teaching us. And with that, they often tell stories. So I kept hearing these stories about one of my teachers escaped from Tibet and being shot, left for dead, and still getting out. And that there were only a few of the masters from Tibet that were still alive that had escaped. And I thought, oh, this is a story that needs to be told before they're lost. And so, not that the Tibetans wouldn't have told the story. I mean, goodness gracious, of course they did. But I talked to Harvey about it, who my husband is a professional journalist. He's written for the newspapers all of his career. So I presented it to him and he said, yes, let's do it. And our goal was to write a book that was not a religious book, but an adventure story that told the story of Bun and and these people who had escaped and the diaspora.
Okay.
It turned out to be this great adventure and this wonderful gift to us to be able to speak with all these people in interviews and to travel all the different places that we traveled in order to research this book.
Can I do something? Can I bring you back a little bit because this is a wonderful story, but it's as much about who you are and
Okay.
and about what actually drew you to something so completely different. I mean, as I said to Bruce earlier,
Okay.
when most people are considering putting their feet up, you come up with a wonderful plan to go on this epic adventure with your wonderful husband Harvey. What I mean, were you interested in travel in the past? Was this something? What did you do? How was your life before the Bond months? Really?
Before the Bun monks.
Yes.
Well, I was raised my father was in the Air Force. So I was raised in a family. I have 3 sisters, there's 4 of us, and we've just traveled many places around the world. And we like to travel anyway and do adventurous things. So that is a part of my DNA. And then was a school teacher for 10 years and then went back to college and became a veterinarian. And so at the time I was found Bun, or it found me, actually, is what happened. I had a small animal practice. So I was working a business and very busy in my community, although always a environmental activist.
Uh-huh.
So I had been raised in the Methodist Church as a Christian in the Methodist Church, but I left it probably in the middle of high school. It just didn't make sense to me. So I'd spent most of my adult life as an atheist.
Yeah.
And I had a dream which was so vivid and so clear and so long that I later have claimed it was a vision. I don't know whether it was a dream or a vision, but I was able to remember it, which I don't remember my dreams. And in it, I had a monk sitting in my backyard like a garden statue. And then this whole parade of monks came to pick him up and carry him away with all this ceremony and sound and horns and lights and drums and everything to take him to go and learn to be my teacher.
My goodness.
And this was so amazingly different than anything I'd ever experienced in my life. And it was so crystal clear that I said, this is something I need to pay attention to.
Mm-hmm.
So I went and bought all kinds of books at the half price bookstore on Buddhism, and it's specifically Tibetan Buddhism, because I recognized by the clothes, and this is how clear the dream was, the clothes that the monk was wearing, that he was wearing Tibetan Buddhist clothes.
Goodness.
And so it took me 2 or 3 years of just sort of keeping my eye out and checking things out here. And some teacher might come through and going and listening to him. I went and saw Thich Nhat Hanh and thought, well, maybe the more Zen Buddhism would be up my alley, even though I didn't wear Tibetan robes, but which I love Thich Nhat Hanh. Don't get
Yes.
me wrong. I love Thich Nhat Hanh. But so after a few years, I came to meet teachers of Bun that attracted me and felt like home. So I have just studied that since then, and there's plenty to study. I know there's a
And
lot of people, when you start to explore, that you may dabble here and dabble a little bit there, or check this one out over here, but it's really, for the Bun, there's so much there, and that once you get into it, if you start studying, then you give you a chance to get deeper to see if it really is a fit, as opposed to just dabbling here and there with different things.
that's fascinating. Because I sometimes think that great ideas have a consciousness all of their own. They seem to come to the right person who can somehow make them come into life. So you obviously, given that you're a veterinarian and that you had an interest in the environment and that, is that what actually brought you to explore that a little further, or were there other elements of the faith that you were really interested in?
I think that the fact that the Bun tradition is based in earth kind of things and the elements. There's even a practice of there's multiple practices of the 5 elements, and all of the other practices that they have, that and the meditations are connected back into earth-based things as much as you want to. And
Mhm.
so I think that provides it with a great base for and a grounding and a foundation. I don't think that necessarily, that's not, that was what gave me the grounding and the foundation that allowed me to explore all sections of it.
Wonderful. So look, one day you came home to your lovely husband Harvey, and you said, "I have an idea."
Yeah.
What did you do?
He, my husband was working at the time. He got a job covering Galveston, and so his office was in the house, and so I came home and said, Harvey, my teacher says this is, let's write a book, or let's write this story up of my teachers who were shot escaping from Tibet. There's only 3 or 4 of them that are left still alive. Let's write their story up, because it needs to be told. My mom was older, and I just began to see my dad had already passed. I began to see all the stories from that generation that were being lost
Mhm.
by us not getting them, not us in particular, but without the them getting written down and told because it was such an amazing time.
Mm.
We had no idea how amazing this story was. And we were able to luck into a really, really great story to tell.
You were.
It's unbelievable. It,
Culminating with His Holiness the Dalai Lama writing the foreword for this book. I mean, that's how effective, how wonderfully you produced it. Can you read us a little bit
I
from the
was
book?
just going to say, if you'd like, I'll read a little section of it to
Yes.
let you know about the start of it. This is actually the prologue. It's called A Deadly Encounter at 15,000 feet.
Okay.
Our main character is named Tenzin Namdok, and there are three main characters. And so we start the book outlining Tenzin Namdok and then bringing in the other two and then meshing them together as the story goes along. So this is the prologue. Fear hastened Tenzin Namdok to the top of a rocky ridge, one of many that crisscrosses Tibet's highest plateau. A frigid wind whipped his face as he scanned the treeless, rocky landscape, searching for a glimpse of the Chinese troops who hunted him and his companions. He knew the soldiers would shoot them on sight. The year was 1960. The Chinese had invaded Tibet a decade early and cajoled it into surrender with the promise of respect for its religion and culture. Forsaken by the rest of the world, its military severely outmatched, Tibet grudgingly agreed to allow the China to station troops in its capital, Lhasa. But Chinese communism was incompatible with the deeply religious Tibetan culture. Popular resentment swelled, finally exploding in a violent uprising. In retaliation, the Chinese began a vicious campaign of religious persecution. Tenzin, 34, one of the most revered lamas of the Bun religion, Tibet's oldest and least known faith, was among thousands of Tibetans fleeing the country to avoid Chinese re-education sessions, where they were forced to accuse, beat, and even execute neighbors and family members in a campaign targeting religion and class. Chinese troops were dispatched to seal the borders and hunt Tibetans fleeing to Nepal, India, and Bhutan. Tenzin hoped to outpace his pursuers as he headed west across Tibet's bleakest and least populated terrain. Strung out along the trail with Tenzin were 30 companions, among them the most learned Bon lamas. Others were monks who had renounced their vows of nonviolence in order to protect the lamas. The lamas and their escorts had traveled hundreds of miles from several different monasteries to Tenzin's small remote monastery on the Changtong Plateau, a vast and desolate landscape of high plains and mountains thinly populated by nomadic herders. In this time of crisis, they looked to Tenzin for direction because of his eminent reputation. They would have lost that leadership had he taken an offer of safe passage from a wealthy merchant making his way to the border, who told stories of Chinese cruelty and brought news that the Dalai Lama had left the country. The merchant had urged Tenzin to leave with him, but Tenzin would not forsake his fellow monks. Disregarding his own safety, he had resolved to wait word from the lamas who, unbeknownst to him, were dodging Chinese patrols as they made their way to him. Tenzin and the lamas had set out 3 days earlier, joined by dozens of lay Tibetans and a group of armed rebels. Tenzin divided them into 3 groups. Each group would travel within sight of the others, allowing the others to flee if one group was attacked. Heading west, they changed directions whenever they spotted the black yak-haired tents of nomads or their flocks of sheep. They knew that fear or Chinese silver could induce the nomads to betray their fellow Tibetans. The monks carried the few sacred texts and artifacts they'd been able to rescue from their monasteries before they were looted by the Chinese troops. Tenzin carried the most sacred object, a 600-year-old reliquary containing the ashes of the founder of Bun's premier monastery. The artifacts were mere slivers of a culture under assault by the Chinese. Soldiers were torturing and killing monks, razing temples, and destroying texts, statues, and paintings. Tenzin's world was being ripped apart. Escape was the only way to ensure the monks' survival and the survival of Bun itself. Their only escape route was across the daunting Himalayas that lay south of the vast plateau. In Sanskrit, Himalaya means the abode of the snow. The Himalayas would be the final abode for untold numbers of Tibetans as they died from hunger, cold, avalanches, and steep plunges from rocky heights during their long trek to freedom. Moving as fast as possible, members of Tenzin's party continually cast wary eyes behind them. As the cold blue sky faded towards darkness, the monks made camp in the shadow of a mountain at the edge of a lake, tethering their pack animals and pitching their tents. While the animals were being unloaded, a black donkey reared and snorted, refusing to be handled. Tenzin saw it as a dark portent. As the monks crouched around the campfire, heating water for black tea, the crack of a single bullet rent the air. The men bolted upright in alarm. The shot grew to a fusillade as the Tibetans scattered. Streams of green tracer bullets licked at scurrying figures, pitching them onto the earth. Tenzin ran for his life.
My goodness. That is that is edge of seat stuff. I mean, this is, and it's true. It's a true story. It must have been an utterly terrifying time in their lives.
Oh, it was, yes,
Mm.
absolutely, absolutely, and that's what we hoped for. We wrote it as a true story that reads like a novel,
Uh-huh.
so that you'd be interested in continuing to read about it.
Absolutely. So what you wanted, you in order to get, because you knew of the story, you knew of Tenzin and his two his the two others. I'm so sorry. I have a note of them and I can't think of them, but you mentioned them. So the three monks, Tenzin is shot at one point and then it goes on to take months to recover. He survives that. And there are a number of instances in that journey where something from almost a divine intervention occurs. You mentioned one where they go to cross a river and the river turns to ice.
Excuse me.
Uh-huh.
There's the every time the story. This story, we didn't make this up. So this story has so many instances where magic or the protectors or divine intervention, I don't know, the spirits of the land have intervened in order to have him survive. First of all, he wasn't killed. And then as the Chinese soldiers were walking around camp, finishing off the camp, one of them stood over him to kill him, and the nun next to him, the Chinese soldier next to him says, "No, don't shoot him. He's going to die anyway," and walked off and left him there. And then he had some of his companions who rescued him, but then a day later or so, they were caught by the Chinese and taken off to a concentration camp, and he was left to die again by a stream, asked to go to a stream. And in the night, that night, another Tibetan came by with a caravan of yaks. He was on his way to escape, and he stopped and stayed with him for over 2 weeks, nursing him. So it was another instance where someone's by happenstance came along in order to save him. Then after 10 months in a concentration camp, he was took the opportunity to escape, and they didn't know how they were going to cross the Brahmaputra River, which is this giant, very strong river. And they worried about it. They didn't have boats. They didn't know what they were going to do when they got to it. And so they were going down the valley, and they went across what they thought was a frozen lake or pond. And when they got to the other side, it started climbing up again, and they realized that they had crossed the river, and that the river had frozen in the section where they had to cross it. So it's the whole story is just full of, and I couldn't make this up if I was, if I was writing a fantasy or
I know.
a modern realist, the surreal movie books that you have. I couldn't make this stuff up. It was just one instance after another. So it was quite interesting. The other two monks were knew each other in childhood, and they were from a different part of Tibet, and they did not experience the same. They witnessed the shelling of Lhasa and were able to escape from there uneventfully. But we have a nice chapter in there describing the shelling of Lhasa. Interestingly enough, yesterday, March 10th, was the 60-year anniversary of the uprising.
Goodness.
No, actually, it's 75 years anniversary of the uprising, I think. Well, it was 1959.
59, is it?
Anyway,
But
yesterday was the anniversary of the uprising in Lhasa, March 10th. So that is celebrated with demonstrations every year around the world.
It's not forgotten. But the other wonderful thing is that Tenzin is celebrating his 100th birthday this year.
His 100th birthday was celebrated in February with great fanfare in Kathmandu at the monastery where he now lives.
Were you in touch with him for that?
We went in December to see him, and we saw him in January ahead of that time.
Yeah.
And it was so great to see him because, of course, at 100, he's small and tiny and shriveled, and his leg hurts all the time. And so he's in a wheelchair most of the time. And all the pictures that I see of him, he feels like he's fading away. And I was but when I got to see him, his life force is so strong. And it was so terrific to go see him because when I walked in the room, he just lit up. And he said, "Oh, Jackie," he says, "you guys gave me my memory back."
For goodness sake.
He said, "I didn't remember how far it was from here to here." And he said, "You all looked it up." And he was so pleased. And it was so gratifying to have him acknowledge and be pleased with the book. It was.
You were saying there's a presence about him that you feel when you're in his.
Oh my goodness. Well, even when we were interviewing all through the process, it took us about 10 years to do this because, of course, Harvey and I were both still working. I had my business and he had his job at the newspaper. And so we took a trip every year to go and interview them. And starting in India and Kathmandu in 2012. So when we started interviewing him, he was very, there wasn't anything particularly special about his essence. Unlike the Dalai Lama, whose aura fills the whole room, Yungzhen's does that to a little degree, but mostly when you're in his presence, you just feel so calm and peaceful. And so it's like he radiates this calm and peace from his essence. And even after you leave him and you just are going about your business, as the Zen people say, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water, and after enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. So even after you've been there to see him and you're just walking around going about your business, everything is just fine, perfect. Everything, you feel complete, which is one of the words that is used for the way you see the world when you are able to recognize your own true mind and your own true nature. That it's all complete, and that's the way you feel after you've been with him.
Which is what you were saying. The whole Falun Po faith is about. It's not so much about
Finding your own true way. Yes, your own
mindful.
true nature.
Uh-huh.
And which, of course, your own true nature is just, we all have it. We're all Buddhas.
Hmm.
We just haven't discovered it because we're clouded. It's clouded with distractions and our negativities and things that once we begin to recognize and work on, we can begin to clear.
Absolutely. So tell us, how far did it, this took you far and wide, as we say. I mean, the Tencent is now in India. They managed to escape and they brought their beautiful relics and artifacts and their wealth of knowledge, his training, because you do say that he was almost born to this. There was a drive in him to,
Yes, yes,
you know,
yes.
that.
Well, there before they got to India. Now, many of the refugees, many of the diaspora went to India or Nepal and into refugee camps. They didn't really have any work. The Indian government put them to work building roads and so forth, which sounds terrible and almost like slave labor. But it was actually, what we found was that both the Indian and the China and the Nepalese government did quite well by these immigrants. And I think about it in terms of the whole immigration situation going on now, that where people have to flee not by their own choice.
Yes.
And so that those governments were facing great pressure from China not to help the Tibetans, but they did.
Hmm.
And so the conditions were so bad for the Tibetans because the weather was so different. They came from very cold in altitude down to a jungle, and it was just their bodies were not made for it.
Uh-huh.
But the story doesn't end. The story ends in India, but it doesn't go from Tibet to India. The,
Uh-huh.
the three main characters ended up going to London with David Snellgrove, this British scholar
Hmm.
who got a Rockefeller grant and picked them in order to study Bunn and brought them to London. He had a home out in Berkhamsted, and
Hmm.
so he set them up out there, and they stayed for 3 years, learned English and Western customs. And the first book in English that was written about Bunn, called The 9 Ways of Bunn, was co-authored by Tenzin Namdok and David Snellgrove. So it allowed them to gather the resources they needed to go home and to find a place to develop a community in exile. And so that's what they did in India.
Hmm.
It's up in the northern part in Himachal Pradesh, which is near the edges of the Himalayas. So it feels much more like home, and the culture and the climate is better up there. It's not in Dharamsala, which it's about 8 hours from Dharamsala, which is where His Holiness and the majority of the Tibetan community in exile lives in India.
Okay. So how did you begin? Give us a little idea about your own particular epic journey, and that's what it was. I mean, obviously, it's about uh, you know a survival and the journey from one place to another. But you had that. So you had an epic journey as well in writing that book. Where did it take you?
Well, first of all, we started by asking permission. Told them what we wanted to do and asked for permissions and blessings. And once they said yes, then it was an epic journey and an epic adventure. But it was also, for me personally, a huge responsibility, because
Uh-huh.
there wasn't anybody else doing this. They hadn't given anybody else permission to do this, and so it was a huge responsibility to make sure that we got it done. So we started out with interviews in India and in Kathmandu with our two biggest characters, the two main monks. The third monk had stayed out of monkhood and stayed in academia, and he was living in Paris. So we contacted him through Zoom and Skype, back when Skype was being used. And then from there, we planned a trip to Tibet to see where it was they had been. And then we would go, interesting, this is a connection to you guys. I looked up Dublin before I came on so I could learn a little bit about your city. And I found out that one of the biggest deals is the Guinness Stout, right? Or the Guinness Brewery, right? Well,
Absolutely.
old Guinness gave Tenzin Namdok a castle in France, which, as if you all know, old homes is just a money pit. But it was a place in France to start a center for summer retreats and teachings. And so we would go to France in the summertime to see Yungsen because he would be there teaching, or Tenzin Namdok, that's his name. His title is Yungsen. He would be there teaching, so we would go there to interview him. And of course, you would interview, and then I would transcribe the interview. We would record the interview, and then I'd come home and transcribe it. I don't know if anybody's done any transcribing, but it's about 4 hours of transcribing to every hour of interview. But anyway, it's a great joy to finally be able to write it down and figure out exactly what they said. And then we would go through, even if we had an appointment the next day, we'd go through the story that night and see, okay, then this happened, this, and then we'd go, wait a minute, something's wrong here. So we go and get clarity on it. And each time we talked through the story, we got clearer and clearer and more detail. So that was great. And so it was a 10-year process of that. At one point, we went to London to check on any references that were left in the university there. And then also we got to go see the house they lived in Berkhamsted. We went out there and found the house and knocked on the door. Told them that we understood this was the house that David Snellgrove had. And they took us in, they brought us in and showed us all through the house and took us out into the backyard where the monks had built the brick wall and a stupa back there, and it was still standing. So they were very gracious and very kind to show us all of that. So I would say France, and then one of the ancillary characters was living in Estonia at the time. So while we were in Europe, we popped over to Estonia and interviewed with him. David Snellgrove, even though he was British, he ended up living the last few years of his life in Italy. So one time when we'd gone to France for the summer, or not for the summer, but for a retreat, we drove down to Italy to Turin to interview him, which was a great treat. He was not as sharp as he'd been, I'm sure, when he was younger, but his personality is still there. So that's something for us all to remember. If we want to be wonderful in our old age, we should be wonderful now. His personality was still there and so strong, and it was really great to be able to experience the forcefulness and the wherewithal of someone who would organize something so profound and yet so out of the ordinary and take care of these guys and bringing them to London.
Can I ask you a question on that?
Absolutely.
What was his drive? How had he come across this? And he actually went to, where did he turned up in, where was he in Tibet?
He was a British soldier in India during the war, and got hooked on adventure and alternative cultures and so forth. He was a Christian. I mean, he was a Catholic, lifetime, long, faithful Catholic, but he got really hooked on the Eastern culture and religions, and he was fascinated from an academic point of view. And so he got malaria and recuperated in a town where he could practice Tibetan. So he learned to speak Tibetan and practice Tibetan. And then he came across and he was introduced to Bun at some point along the way.
Mhm.
And he was even more interested because it was more strange and more weird and not accepted. And so,
Mhm.
of course, that drew his attention to that. So when the opportunity came up to get the Rockefeller grant, he decided he wanted to do it with some bumpos so that he could learn more about it. He wanted to stay in India, but then after the war, India was given back to India by the
Mhm.
British. And so he had to find another way to do his exploring, and it was through his academic work at the university.
Amazing, amazing. So many things fell into place for these,
Yes,
for the,
yes,
yes,
yes.
and it's part of it. So continue. You then continued. You went to Tibet, to Nepal.
Yes, been to
Yes.
Tibet, and then we've been back to. Then we were back to India for the funeral of one of our characters, main character, and then we just this year went back to India, Nepal, sort of as a swing through to thank everybody. Don't pass books out and see everybody and thank them for their help in the production of the book and so on.
Oh, and how did you?
Really
How did
love.
you get contact? You made contact with the Dalai Lama yourself, or was that? Was
Well,
it?
as everything in life is, it's all connections.
Yeah.
So the we have a geshe. Geshe is the term within the tradition that means that's a school. It's a graduation title from the university, from the school within the monastery, and it's the equivalent of a PhD. It takes or more. It usually takes 13 years or so, 12 to 14 years to study to pass the geshe exams. And so we have a geshe that lives in Houston, who is a friend of mine. And he helped us with many, many, many things, with translation and with advice and questions about Tibet and question. Although he's from Nepal, he knows the Bonpo tradition. And one of his good friends is, this is a convoluted story. I hope you all enjoy it.
All
But
right, we're with you.
one of his good friends is a Bonpo that sits on the Tibetan Government in Exile Council.
Okay.
So has connection to the office of the Dalai Lama. Now you know the Dalai Lama no longer has anything to do with the government of Tibet in exile. He
Mhm.
gave up that position. And so, but nonetheless, Geshe Denma's friend on the council had connections with the office of the Dalai Lama. So he presented the book to them and asked them if they would be interested in doing a foreword. And so they said yes. They did have a couple of sentences in there that they didn't quite like the wording of in relationship to the Chinese government. So
Okay.
we, of course, very easily and willingly changed those. And
Yes.
that's how they came to write the foreword for the book, which we're just thrilled with and
Absolutely.
so honored. Every time I say the book has a foreword by the Dalai Lama, I get goosebumps even
Yeah.
now.
It's another one of those blessings that you talked about. That
Yes,
the book itself, as a whole body of work, appears to be somehow blessed in its way. Because
yes.
you've won several awards at this stage. What was the award you won last
We,
year?
we the International Book Award for Creative Nonfiction last year.
Isn't that amazing? Yes. And do you feel that there's an energy about it of its own? That it's I know that you and Harvey have the most incredible passion about this, and you've experienced this story, you've lived with it. As you say, it became clearer and clearer and clearer as you worked through it, and transcribing and all of these other things, that it's come to the point where it's really part of your own marrow, isn't it?
Oh yeah, and I actually feel quite relaxed now. I'm not that I'm ready to go, but I can go because the book's done and out into the world. Our
Well,
one thing that I would say is that if you have something that you believe in, it just stay with it and make it happen. We in the process of getting published, not self-publishing, but publishing with a publisher in the industry, and at least in the United States, the first thing you do is you get an agent. and then
Yeah.
the agent pitches the book to the publisher companies and tries to get the best deal for you. Well, we sent out 56. Harvey, was it 52 or 56?
It was 52.
52 agent queries before we had one accept our book. So my advice is, if it's something that you believe in, to stick with it,
Uh-huh.
and don't get discouraged, to
Never
just
know.
go for it.
Hmm.
So, and it is a book. The reason they didn't want it is because it's not a book. It's a small niche book,
Yeah.
and it is, doesn't have a wide audience necessarily. Our agent said the best advice to us, or gave me the best quote, which I actually have written up over here on my wall next to me. The book has its own destiny.
Yes.
And the reason she took it is because she's quite an accomplished agent, but she does one heart project a year, and ours was the one she picked for last year because she knew it wouldn't make any money, but she thought it needed to be published.
Absolutely. And of course, and even those of us here, and please do speak for yourselves, it would not have been something that, I mean, yes, we'd understand perhaps Tibetan monks, Buddhist monks, and a little bit about that, not very much, I suppose, either. We have, areas that do celebrate Buddhism with the flags, the colored flags, and occasions of celebrating. But we had no understanding of the Bon Po, as you say, and also the fact that it is probably the oldest religion in the world, the earliest developed religion.
Maybe it's pretty old.
Yeah.
There's a lot of similarities to it, to the Native American, some of the Native American traditions, and
Uh-huh.
also I think, sort of, if you look at, like, somebody told me the other day that Ireland had some religions, or some traditions that were even older than the pagans, that the Coptics and stuff like that, that they're maybe, and who knows how any of those melded at that time, because there's no written language to show us anything, maybe some symbolism, but
Mm.
that
And
would.
as I was saying earlier, that really the early, I suppose, those even our own sort of ancient religions or um, faiths or whatever had to do with Druidism, connections to the trees, to the land, to the elements, to the water. I mean, very
Yes.
strong connection. Bridget, of course, say Bridget is connected to the rivers and the wells, the water wells. So almost everything does go back to the things that we need to support our life here on Earth as well. There's a couple of questions here. Can I just go to that? Do you mind, Jackie?
Not
Um,
at all. Happy to
think,
hear which part of it people are interested in.
oh yeah, and do please come with your questions. It'd be lovely to hear what you've got. Trina Hannon says the audiobook read by Jackie would be wonderful. Where do we buy your book? Great
Ah,
question, Trina. Because I
thank
checked
you,
up.
thank you very much for that.
That's true.
The book, we weren't sure we would get an audiobook, and the publisher did have it read by a guy named Jazz Sands. He's either British or has a very slight Brit, but there is a slight British accent to it, and we love it. It's very well written. So if you like to listen to your books, I highly recommend it.
Yeah,
And the book is available most everywhere in the paperback, or in a digital, or
yeah.
the audio. And
And
the
in the Kindle
paperback
as well.
part we've got maps and photographs in it, of the people and some of the places
Yeah.
in that's in the story. So
Well, that's wonderful because I checked as well beforehand. So I have it on audio because when I go out for my walks, it's my easiest way of reading. And I also always feel like I've got some company with me as well, actually. It's really bad if I end up talking back to whoever's reading the audiobook. That's when things I need to worry about things. But also I checked up. So we can get it from Amazon. We can get it from Eason's has it and Dubray Books have it. They certainly have it in their online store. So if anybody wants to check it out, do. And it's called, can you hold up the book cover again, Jackie, please? It's called Flight of the Bon Monks, War, Persecution and the Salvation of Tibet's Oldest Religion, and by Harvey Rice and Jackie Cole. And it reads like a wonderful epic novel, a great journey, and And I know that you two have been as well. Now, Eileen has a question for you. Sorry. Oh, did you want to say something, Jackie? Sorry, before I go.
I was just going to say we have a website. A Flight of the Bun Monks is the
Yes.
website.com. And
Uh-huh.
there's more ancillary stories and pictures of our characters and stuff like that on there. We the the publisher came up with the title and the cover, and isn't it pretty? We just love it. It's so striking.
Yeah, it
Okay.
gives a lovely sense of what we might expect in the book. Eileen says, "Do you feel the book changed you in ways of how you look at the world? You're an amazing woman and such courage and perseverance. You tell your story so well. It's awesome." So your question is, do you feel the book changed you in ways of how you look at the world?
Um, well, of course, anything that you do that has this much of an impact on you is going to change you. The question is, can I articulate the ways I've been changed? Um, it has deepened my respect for my teachers and for the religion. It's there's I wanted to try to find a way to get devotion in this, a chapter, a name, the title of the book, something, I don't know, because there's so many examples of devotion to the country, to their teachers and each other, to the religion. And it's just an unbelievable connection, strong heart connection in there.
Mhm.
So that has helped. And then also, it's also really been very powerful in strengthening Harvey's and I relationship.
Ah,
That
that's
it's
interesting.
not that it's been an easy road, but we have contracts written where we each are required to do certain things, and we both signed them and stuff like that, so that to try to eliminate very many extra arguments. But it has been, by working together on this, it has really strengthened our relationship as well.
And I'm fascinated in that actually, because for many people now, I know because you told me that you and Harvey found each other, and became and it came together in your 50s. So this wonderful adventure is very much a part of not only sort of developing your relationship, but also, as you quite rightly said there, a way of discovering more about each other.
Yes.
At a time when so often, when couples who may have been focused on their careers or their family or whatever else, very often, as things quieten down, they end up having to learn to live together in a sense. So for you, was that? I mean, Harvey took care of you obviously when you had serious altitude sickness when you were in where were you, in Tibet? Yeah. And so did you learn more about each other as you went through this? What did you learn about Harvey?
Oh. Well, he's a really good writer, huh?
This is true.
He's a
Thank
really good
goodness.
writer. He's very focused and diligent. And so usually, I don't know about you guys, but what I'm finding is that the thing that attracts you and that you love most about him also irritates you the most, right? So he can focus in a room that's got all chaos around him, and which is wow. I wish I could do that. But he also, I have to go, Harvey, look at me. I'm trying to talk to you.
Fantastic.
But just he's a good guy. He has a big heart, and so which is just the more we work together, the more that's reinforced.
And did you discover anything about yourself? Anything that you weren't quite aware of until this?
I don't know.
Harvey might tell us. Harvey might be able to answer
Harvey might be able to tell us something. Yeah.
that. If Harvey wants to tell us anything or share anything, he's very welcome to. We'll go back to some questions here.
It's
Trina,
interesting. He's sitting on the other side of this room so he could listen.
we're delighted he is there. He's the one very cool, wise, and ageless goddess. He's very good. He's very welcome. Trina saying, fantastic story. Thank you for following your dream. What a journey. And thank you for following your dream. And that's an absolute truth. Um, this is Mary. She said, Jackie, did you feel you both were channeled to write it from spirit? Is there any sense of that there was a kind of channeling?
I never thought so at the time, but when I look back on the sequence of events, I actually do think that we were brought together, and that, the whole thing, when I look at all of the series of events that brought me to Bun and brought me along and taught me this and brought me Harvey and then ended up with the book, I can see it as a path that I never felt like I was channeling something from the outside. But I do think that we were given a path and a task without saying, without the um, um, tablets from Moses being brought down to us. It was just opened up for us, and that was what we needed to do. But we weren't told, go do this.
That's amazing. Yes, it feels, even listening to you telling the story, it feels like that. That's been very much the case. That this is a has a life of its own, and even in the very beginning, it woke something up in you at some stage that just began to plant the seeds, I suppose. I mean, when you talk about Tenzin, you talk about him as almost as though he came into this world with a mission. He may not have realized it himself, but everything he did along the way, everywhere he found himself, every thing that happened to him, even the fact that he went to a monastery for 4 years because he wanted to learn. And you tell the story in another interview. I heard you talk about the fact that Tenzin turned up and sort of said he was an artist, and he said that he was doing these little drawings. So the monk eventually began to teach him, is this to be a lama? Is this to be, was that what it
Yeah.
was?
Well, he, when you think about, yeah, Tenzin always wanted to be a monk. And well, he didn't know it. He had a really hard childhood. His father died and his mother left, or he was shuttled into his father's and to his uncle's, because of the tradition of the Tibetan that if a family splits, the boy children go with the men part and the girl children go with the women. And so he was separated from his mother at a very young age, and suffered the loss of his father and his uncle at a young age, and ended up with what we call in the book a monk uncle. One of his uncles was a monk in a monastery who was very kind and gentle to him and started to teach him about, so he was living the monk life as a very young child,
Mhm.
and then ended up but also in Tibet, the culture and the religion and the way of being are all intertwined. There's no
Ah,
separation from it. It's
yes,
not like you identify as a Catholic. You're here, you're Irish, but you identify as Catholic, or you're Irish and you identify as a Protestant or whatever. It just is. It's a
yes,
way of being. And so, but he wanted to be a monk, and he was headstrong enough for one reason or another to fight for it the whole time, which was also, and I'm not sure fight is exactly the right word, but to insist on it
yes, yes.
in the face of opposition. And so and that's the way he was in his entire life. He just is. And I got to thinking about, at one point I was thinking about how remarkable he was, in that even after he came back from London, a lot there were lamas and bumpos that were of as much import as he was while he was gone to London, who were there in India and Nepal, and he was communicating with them, but they didn't do anything until he got back. When
Ah,
he got back, they said, do something. We, we're losing our community, and the bumpos are scattered all over every place, and they're losing hope and faith, and do something. And so it turned out that Tenzin Namdak was the one to do something. And
yes.
so I got to thinking about what it was in his character that everybody else looked to him, as well as he was the one that accepted the responsibility. So
That
it's amazing, amazing
amazing.
individual.
Thank you so much. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say the second of the big monks became the head of the religion. So one of the other ones that had been in London had became the head. He was picked to become the head of the religion. And that's a whole nother story, which is very interesting in the book. And then the third major monk that was in that's our third major character, stayed in academia. And so he became the highest, the best, and the best known and the highest Tibetan to ever study and to record Tibetology. And he wrote a number of books and treatises on the Bon religion as well as on other aspects of the Tibetan and Tibetan Buddhism. And he is very well known in academia for his work, Sant and Karma. So they all did great lives, and he was really important to us in teaching us about the every day-to-day life of Tibetans and what the culture was, because the monks didn't want to take the time to teach us about that. But he
Uh-huh.
understood how important it was for us to understand that stuff in order to make it come alive, which is what we had hoped to do in the book. So if you want to go on a big adventure and learn about new exotic places, it's in this book. It's because we start in Tibet of the 50s, 40s and 50s, and then move you to through Tibet and into India and London, and then back to India all the way through up till now. Actually, when
Ah,
we brought the book up to date with where each character, where each of the characters are and what they're doing up through 22.
wasn't it wonderful that they were all still alive, that you were able to speak to them
Ah, it's
firsthand?
amazing.
Isn't
It's
it?
yeah, we were lucky. Like I said, we were just lucky we got the idea at the right time. So maybe we were channeled.
I think you may have been, and they certainly, whoever was coming to you was tapping on the right shoulder, because you took that story and you ran with it in a way. I mean, that story of you and Harvey, literally picking up and running and beginning that journey, to my mind, is another fascinating part of the whole flight of the Bone Monks. Everybody here is saying thank you, that they're looking forward to reading your book. Philippa, looking forward to reading your book. Jackie, extraordinary story. Wonderful time and effort you and Harvey put into creating the book. That's absolutely true. Thank you, Jackie. Looking forward
Y'all
to
are
reading
so
your book.
y'all are so kind, and if you get a chance to read it or listen to it, I hope you really enjoy it. And please, contact us through the website and let us know how you like it, or if you have any questions. And if you
Happily.
like, I'd be very happy to come back and talk some more if you want at any time. And we could talk a little bit about more some of the simple meditation techniques that you use, that we use, and stuff like that. So anyway, thank you
Lovely.
so much for
Oh,
having
but,
me.
but not at all. What is now? What's new? What's going to happen now for Harvey and yourself? Have you new plans? Is there some new
Well, we
adventure?
spent a year trying to promote the book, and so
Yeah.
that's that was not quite full time, but full time for retired people trying to
Well,
promote the book. And we will continue to look for avenues to do that as well. We're also beginning to think about another book. Because we like working together, and interestingly enough, we're not sure what the topic will be. But we do want to do another book where where it'll be a true book, a true story, where we take a person and run it through a hysterical, yeah, historical era, to try to bring alive that era through the telling of a story with a narrative arc.
oh, and it's no trouble to either of you. And one of the things that we have planned for ourselves over the coming weeks is to have an evening where we talk about interesting travel. So many of us at a certain point in time, we get to like a particular place, and it's where we might, visit regularly. But sometimes it's a really good idea to maybe look at something completely different. And my goodness, you and Harvey certainly have done that. So the idea of
Let me know when that is. I'll come join your
we'll do that.
discussion.
We'll do that very soon, because I can see lovely Eileen there. She's been to Machu Picchu. She's done the Camino Way. She's done, and Ashlyn Coyle is here. She's going to be our resident travel agent to all of these exotic and wonderful places. But yes, please, we'd love to hear more about these places, and we'd love to have you join us if you possibly could on that occasion. Anybody who has got interesting stories, I'm going to call out now. Please come and tell us about them. I'm just seeing, would Jangan Buddhist Meditation Centre in Cork be a good place to send your book? The Georgian, yeah, there's a Buddhist center in Cork, in Ireland. How do you pronounce it, Trina? Is it Joggen Bera?
I'm afraid I've been no good at pronouncing it. Sorry.
You know
Okay,
how to, can you type it? I'll put it in the, is it in the chat?
it's there. Did you put the correct spelling, Trina? Is that how it's spelled?
I think that's it. It's
O G C.
Drogchen.
Yeah, it's the Buddhist center, and it's in the most beautiful place in Cork. It's
I'll look it up
yeah.
and see. Yes, I would hope they would be interested. The Buddhists and the Buddhists have had centuries of denigrating the Bun.
Mm,
It started out when they banned Bun in Tibet in the 7th century for political reasons, and
yeah.
so there have been centuries and centuries of tales of how evil Bun was and naughty we were and all that kind of stuff without ever really looking at what the religion truly is. And so the Buddhist groups have not quite been quite as interested in the book as some other people would be.
Mhm.
However, I am always hopeful that once they read it, they would understand a little bit more about it.
Oh, I think they will. Actually, there's a lot. I've been to this particular Buddhist center. It's truly beautiful. It's almost overlooking the Skelligs, and it's looking out across the sea. It is a stunning place, and they're very open-minded. They
Oh,
have a
good.
number of books there. Yeah, and people
Well,
from all.
if someone if I'd be happy to send them a book it's hard to send things overseas if someone would want to, or but if I can look into see what it is and see about sending them a book.
We can I'll be in touch, and I'll let you know what that's about. I can even, and we may even have somebody who would be able to let us know whether how welcome the book would be there. But I
Okay.
truly believe it's very broad. It's a very broad-minded, lovely place, and I'd be really surprised if they didn't have it there. So, and Jackie, I just want to say thank you so much. Everybody here is saying thank you for following your dream, thank you for opening our minds, thank you for sharing this wonderful story, not just the story of the monks, but the story of you and Harvey together as well. And we're so grateful for you coming into our lives. You're really absolutely delightful.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it, and I appreciate y'all listening to my stories. I love to tell stories.
Oh, come back and do it again. Just
Okay.
before I let Jackie go, does anybody have a question they want to ask before she goes? Anybody?
Look,
Okay.
Mary here.
Hello, Mary. There you are. Yes.
If we could see a picture of Harvey. He sounds a fascinating, delightful
There
man.
you go, Mary. I
Harvey,
told you. Harvey,
Harvey.
come and say hello to us. Ah, there you
Hello,
are.
everybody.
Sit
Harvey,
down.
thank you so much. And I know there's smiles, wreaths of smiles amongst all the lovely ladies. Can we just say that you're the very first wonderful, wise and ancient, I was going to say ageless, God, you're a wonderful, so welcome here in this group, and you're the very first man who's ever joined our group, but you really deserve
What
this
an
place.
honor.
You really deserve this place.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much for your work with Jackie and for bringing this to us. And we're really looking forward to whatever else you're going to share with us. You've got years and years and years of experience. You've worked as a reporter. Have you retired, or are you still working?
I retired. I've been retired in 2017.
Aha. So,
45 years in the newspaper business.
wow. So you have a lot to bring, a lot of skill and a wealth of knowledge.
You were stationed in London for a while, weren't you?
Yeah, I was. I used to work for United Press International
Did you?
back when it was actually a worldwide news agency that competed with the Associated Press. Of course, it's since fallen on hard times. But at that time, I was stationed in London on the I was on the Middle East desk,
Goodness.
London,
Yes. Yeah.
and I
So
lived in Chelsea.
very close to where my daughter's living. I don't know if she's even here this evening. She's in Chiswick, not too far from there. Beautiful part of London.
Well,
Absolutely.
one of our next trips will need to be to Dublin.
Well, we're looking, if you do that, we'll all come and meet you. We'll all come and meet you. We'll have a great gathering, perhaps in
Okay.
Merrion Square or the Phoenix Park or somewhere like that. I see Eileen has put in the name of it. It's the DZOGCHEN Jogjen. Beara, Beara is where the geographical location in Ireland is. Beara.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, see, Dzogchen is it's the Tibetan word for great perfection, and that's the curriculum that teaches you to be able to experience your nature, your true nature.
Which is
And
what you were talking.
And if you can live in that true nature, then you've achieved enlightenment.
Well, at least you've opened our door to that, which is something for us this evening. We're all so much more enlightened than we were before we began the evening. Thank you so much to both of you. We really, really appreciate your time and so grateful to you for being here. And the very best of luck with everything you do from now on. We're going to be following you. Thank you. And take good care of yourselves. I'm just going to do one thing before we go, guys. We've got three of our lovely angel cards this evening. And we've got 1, 2, and 3. Do you want to dig? Goodbye, Harvey. Thank you so much. If everyone wants to think about what number they want to do, I'm going to read out card number 1 right now. Is Star Ancestor. These are Kyle Gray's beautiful angels and ancestors cards. And this is the Star Ancestor. Follow the voice of your soul. Follow the voice of your soul. Very much what Jackie was talking about there with becoming who you truly are. Follow the voice of your soul, Star Ancestor. Look to the stars if you picked 1. Number 2, Autumn. Release the old and rest. Release the old and rest. If you picked number 2, maybe it's time to just lay something down and rest. Give it a rest. Take a rest and be restful. Okay, and number 3 this evening, this is a particular card I absolutely love. If you picked it, it's the Heart Guardian. Love and let yourself be loved. The Heart Guardian, love and let yourself be loved. If that one is for you, that's a beautiful card to take away and think about. Okay, everybody, thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you next time. We'll definitely be doing that evening. Please come and let me know about any sort of exciting travel that you've taken. We have one person here who's doing an incredible cruise very soon, and I'm looking forward to hearing all about that. I don't know if she's here this evening, but it's a cruise in Japan, so that should be very interesting. And we have others, of course. I mentioned Eileen's travel there, and many others of you have done wonderful things. Come and let me know about that, and come and share your stories, and we can open up our own kind of adventures and sort of follow little threads of curiosity that might bring new things to us, which is always very interesting. So we'll be in touch. See you very soon. Don't forget about the April 6th one-day workshop in the United Arts Club that I'm doing about learning all about your clairs, your extrasensory powers, your intuitive powers, and we're looking forward to exploring that so much further. You're with good friends here, so it should be a really good day. Take care, everybody. Jackie, thank you so much. The very best of luck to you. Bye-bye now. Bye-bye, everybody.